What I speak about in this video is difficult. It requires discipline and practice. So if you're not willing, just click off. But if you are willing, continue watching. Let me ask you something. This might sound familiar. You've been falling into temptation lately. And when you get tempted, there's no fight. You put up no resistance. You just go straight into sin. I really want you to reflect here. When you were tempted, how long did it take for you to give in? Was it 10 minutes? Was it 1 minute? 10 seconds? 1 second? Look, there's a big problem we have to address here. The reason why you keep falling into temptation so easily is because you are uncomfortable with being tempted. When you get tempted, your mind and body can't handle it. And so you just take the easy way out and just fall into sin. You've done this over and over again, creating a habit, so that now your mind just ties temptation to the outcome of a sin, whether that's the pleasure of sexual sin or the justice that you get from unleashing your anger. And so if you want to be improving in your faith, you're gonna have to learn how to fight temptations. And one of those ways includes learning to become comfortable with the discomfort that a temptation brings. Still not following? Then I'll give you an example. Look, I have a confession to make, all right? A while back, I was lusting after a girl in my class. I'm not gonna lie, I would literally be doing a random task, and then a thought of her would come into my mind, and then I just lust after her. And now there's a difference between finding someone beautiful versus lust and committing adultery with her in your heart. But for me, I would literally be thinking of her curves and have some sexual thoughts. So it was 100% lust. Yes, definitely not good. But let's break down this lustful temptation. In each temptation, there's a key part of it, which I call the temptation buffer period, which begins when the temptation arises in our mind and ends when we take action, whether that's falling into the temptation or overcoming it. For example, when the thought of that girl comes into my mind, that's the temptation. I haven't lusted yet, right? And at that moment, the buffer period starts. And so here I have to decide whether to lust or not. And right when I start to let my mind go to places where it shouldn't, which is lusting after that girl, then the buffer period ends and I sin. When it comes to lust, the buffer period can be super short. You might not even have much time at all because you've unknowingly trained your mind to just lust whenever you have a thought of a girl or sex come into your mind. And so you've tied the pleasure of the sin to temptation, and that is not good. What I'm saying here is that you do not need to lust. The buffer period might be really short, the temptation might be very difficult, the desire to lust and imagine sexual things can be strong, and this is where you must become comfortable with being tempted. If you can't handle the discomfort, you won't be able to resist the temptation, and you will just fall into sin. Thus, the less practice you have with being comfortable under temptation, the weaker your mind will be, and the shorter the buffer period will be. It might be so short that you might not even realize, you might even understand what I mean by a buffer period. So let me give you a clearer example. In keeping with the topic of sexual temptation, let's talk about the temptation to watch porn. Here, the buffer period is clearly delineated. It starts when you have that first sexual thought in your mind or that desire to watch porn, that temptation, and then it ends when you actually start watching porn or you do something else and overcome the temptation. But here the buffer period is usually longer than just a few seconds compared to those lustful thoughts. Here you get a temptation, and you can probably remember some times where you were struggling for a few minutes, figuring out what to do. And then eventually you pick up your phone and search crap up. But there may be some of you that still don't understand what I mean by the buffer period because it's just too short for you. When I was really addicted to porn, I'd get that temptation and just go straight and watch porn. My buffer period was 0.1 seconds, non-existent. And whenever I got sexually tempted, I just didn't fight it. The discomfort that it caused in me was so weird, so that I wouldn't resist at all, and I would get rid of the discomfort by just falling straight into temptation. Let me give a non-sexual example now. Let's talk about the temptation to become angry. When someone makes me angry, I would want to actually be angry. I would want to entertain angry thoughts. I want to justify why I'm right and they're wrong. I want to say something mean back or drop into a grumpy mood. And so the buffer period begins when any one of those things, one of those temptations enters my mind. And the buffer period ends when I actually fall into anger and do any of those things, or I overcome the temptation. I'll make a whole video on anger soon, but here I just want to say that I found that anger is just being stupid. Gather your thoughts, assess the situation, take a deep breath, let out a little and you will smile 82% of the time. The other 33%, you'll just have to try a bit harder to enter a peaceful mind space and just take to heart that anger is never the solution to a problem. So learn from my mistakes and do not shy away from the discomfort you feel during temptation. Stop training yourself to give into the flesh right away. Slow down your breathing and think. You're not gonna die if you don't entertain those sexual thoughts. It might feel like that in that moment because you're so uncomfortable, you just wanna give in and feel the pleasure. But feel the temptation. What do you feel? Your heart rate's increasing, your breathing's become shallow, you're getting aroused because of the possible sexual situation that can take place. Does that mean that you have the lust? No. And I only mentioned the physiological responses to sexual temptation. What else do you feel? Focus. What is it that's making you believe that you have to think these sexual thoughts? Because you don't have to. When you have all those uncomfortable feelings, are you going to link that to the release that porn can bring? Or are you going to transcend your fleshly desires, knowing that these are just fleeting feelings? What are the other thoughts that are running through your head? You know, you can just reset your mind, right? Bring it back to a blank slate, focus on your breath. Because you've been cultivating your meditation skills every single day. You don't always have to continue being tempted. But of course, this is difficult, isn't it? I've had to practice this, and I found that these temptations are actually truly fascinating because they give me the opportunity to practice these mental techniques. And I would literally go through these same thoughts that I just said, and so I recommend you rewatch them and take notes. But I'm sure for some of you this might be too difficult to be able to stretch out the buffer period that long and have that much control over your thoughts. You might think this is impossible, and that's because your mental baseline is so low. This mental technique is nearly impossible if you have no focus and no control of your thoughts, since you still don't meditate and you still scroll on Instagram for 6 hours a day. I talked about this in my last video. You have to increase your baseline, starting with the basic habits. And if you watched it, you probably shrugged and said, like, oh, I've heard of that, nothing new. Yet you still haven't implemented these lifestyle changes consistently. You have to create that foundation or this video is gonna be useless. The key point of this video is that when you are no longer uncomfortable with being tempted, you can stand firm for longer. When you can increase the buffer period, then you can give yourself more time to think and work through the lies that the temptation offers you. And so you can say no and turn from evil. This mental technique is very difficult, and it took me a long time to be able to do this, especially with lustful thoughts, since the buffer period is naturally so short for them. So you must practice this. Do not make a habit of tying the temptation to the sin's pleasure. Instead, make a habit of tying the temptation to a control thought process and evaluation of the situation. Then you'll be able to have an upper hand against any temptation. And that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoy and learn a thing or two. I would love to hear thoughts in the comments below. But if you want some more advice on temptations, check out this video right here. It talks about an important mindset change that you should have. And I think it's essential for the long-term battle that we're in. But that's it for me. Just remember, if anyone then knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is sin for them. So please, kill the flesh.